I saw things like on time and full get implemented at Walmart, or the iWatch get launched with Apple, or ways that healthcare could learn better. If you're trying to handle a lot of receiving and you're not receiving the same way in every site, how do you automate that? When you standardize, you can put in automation. So why are we looking at just healthcare for benchmarks and practices? You have to find the best practice in that area, and it may be a different industry.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to Smarter Sourcing Healthcare, the podcast where we talk to health system supply chain leaders about the issues that they face today and what they're doing about it. And the power of our industry is that we learn from each other, and that's what really this podcast is all about. And we've got a great guest for you today, the hardest working man in show business, I call him, Steve Downey, the Chief Supply Chain Officer, and Steve, you've got also support services under your world, so Chief Supply and Support Services Officer at Cleveland Clinic. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for what you do. It is great that we can learn from each other in this industry and folks like you who have these conversations and use your platform to get the word out. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And, we got a lot of ground to cover today. And I guess my first question is a little bit off the wall, which is, do you know who Bob Odenkirk is?
Well, I wasn't a writer for Saturday Night Live, but I do know who he is.
Yeah. So in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, I think most people maybe know Bob from, but he wrote a memoir, and I'm going to get to the point. But he wrote a memoir called Comedy, 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 Drama, because his fame really came from the dramas that he was in that were really great. And I think if we wrote, maybe if somebody wrote your memoir or you wrote your memoir, it would be logistics, healthcare, and maybe share with us how you got here. You've had a great career. It's been your finest hour. I think as a professional, you've added a lot to the industry, but how did you get to run in the supply chain at a place like Cleveland Clinic?
Yeah, and careers make sense in reverse. They're always hard to see forward, and if I had rewound to college, would I have said I'll be doing this? I know, but always been healthcare. I have a passion for healthcare. I even in college was biomedical engineering, so it's always been healthcare. I'm an electrical engineer by training, actually, and so I remember designing circuits and writing code and everything that came with that. But the path took me into med device, and I got into manufacturing and commercial roles and did a lot of work with customers. And I really enjoyed problem solving and working in healthcare problem solving. And I think if you just put healthcare problem solving, you just defined healthcare supply chain. That like it. I went from med device into bigger and bigger med device roles and then supply chain because I knew how health systems used our products. I had done enough work with physicians and health systems, and it was a natural leap to, okay, we have to get them in their hands. Will you help us figure that out? I have a lot of commercial experience, P&L experience. So that helped me move into third party logistics. And third party logistics was great because I learned how other industries did it, pharma, med device, health systems, CPG. I saw things like on time and full get implemented at Walmart, or the iWatch get launched with Apple, or ways that healthcare could learn better, which still always doing the healthcare side, but seeing everything around it. Then my path took me to Vizient, which I did a lot of work with health systems, and it was operations and consulting, and we had outsourced services where I ran health system supply chains. So it was always work in that space. And then when I could come to Cleveland Clinic and just get even closer to the provider space, I could still bring all that healthcare expertise and the other industry expertise. I know what it's like in the ecosystem. And I think you've heard me talk about this before. The fact that we can think of it as an ecosystem, we're all in this together to serve the patient is important because if you have to imagine what it's like at each step to make it successful for the whole.
Yeah. Were you at all daunted? I mean, Cleveland Clinic's a mature supply chain. You've done amazing things and accelerated it even further, but coming in there as your first role as a chief supply chain officer, was that daunting at all?
Honestly, no. Maybe it should have been. Maybe I should have called you before I started. But no. Um, I knew what I was getting into. I knew the Cleveland Clinic folks actually from my work at Vizient. And so I already had met these people and I knew a lot of my peers already from my work there. And I remember my setup work in COVID, we set up offsite COVID treatment centers for whole states. And that was daunting, right? Somebody says we need 9 treatment centers set up in weeks in places like cafeterias and prisons, and we need to do this in the world of COVID. How fast can you go do this? That was daunting. There are moments where if you think about what we all collectively do, it's amazing to think about. We feed 16,000 meals a day. We process 80,000 sets. We're moving material around for all of the surgeries. We do 300,000 surgeries a year. Like, you think about what's happening at a given moment, it's like, wow, that's incredible that we're doing it. But I think a lot of that goes to the team that does it. There's an incredible infrastructure, places like the clinic and others. You have teams that do that every day, and they know how to deal with the day-to-day challenges and the strategic challenges, and being able to be a leader there is an honor. I think one of the blessings is it's a real team culture. We work best as a team of teams, so you're partnered with clinicians, you're partnered with operational people, you're partnered around the enterprise, and you all together are working to save the patients. And when you do that, it doesn't feel like pressure. Like, it feels like you're all moving together to save the patient rather than this is a Steve problem. Get me something here right now.
Yeah. You know, I've thought of it like that, but I have a friend who's an airline exec, and we always laugh because I go, at any one time, there's 375 planes in the air. But if you think about it from a supply chain, it's the same thing. At any one time across Cleveland Clinic's network, there's how many surgeries going on, how many patient care episodes happening, how many lives are in the balance based on the work that you and your teams do. So, and maybe my other analogy, you know, I had one showbiz analogy. The other one is I think of you as Gene Hackman. In the intro, I said hardest working man or person in show business. You know, think about Gene Hackman in the 1980s. You know, he was in Superman and Birdcage and The Unforgiven. You know, Hoosiers. He was everywhere, and that's kind of how I've seen you dive into this role in a way that is there's really no other word for it. It's just been impressive. You know, you're a leader, you're pushing the industry, you're leading, you're cajoling in some cases, you're taking an active role on boards and different things. How intentional has that been? You know, in this role where you're also leading the supply chain of this massive health system.
Yeah, I don't have a role in Superman. That is always my favorite Gene Hackman role. I would say, i- as an organization, we're encouraged. It's always about patient care, but it's also innovation and education. And I take that personally that part of what we do is try new things. Somebody in the industry has to try new things. Who's going to be the one doing agentic AI or a negotiation bot or a robot in the hallways? And who's going to tell others, well, we tried that and it didn't work very well. And what lesson did we learn from that? So, and we're encouraged to do that. A lot of the Cleveland Clinic folks do that for their specialties. And I part of it is the Cleveland Clinic is the stage getter. It's less about me as the stage getter. And when somebody says we'd love somebody on this stage, they don't say I want Steve. They say I want Cleveland Clinic on the stage. And oh, by the way, Steve can hold his own on the stage. Yes, that'll be good. We do have to walk the talk, and I think that's the we have to deliver. We have to be pushing that envelope. We have to have material that's worth talking about. We continue to push that envelope, and then we continue to share. We can go to ARM and talk about procedure card implementations, and I could tell you the ups and downs of what we learned. And that's good, right? I think that helps the whole industry when we're able to do it. We can do collaboratives where we try to help each other solve problems and share what worked and what didn't. We're all in it together. And if you keep the focus on the patient side, like, you want to share because you want to serve better. And the broader you do that, the better it is.
Yeah. Well, you're humble. You've done a lot of good as an individual, and certainly in your role at Cleveland Clinic. And maybe we shift a little bit from your background and your individual role to Cleveland Clinic. And I think you told me there's kind of three mottos around it: centralized, standardized, then automated in the Cleveland Clinic supply chain. Maybe unpack that a little bit for our audience. What does that mean, and how is it manifesting itself as you align to Cleveland Clinic's overall strategy of serving patients?
Yeah, and we do that as an easy way to remember all of the initiatives that fall under each one. We do a lot just organizationally to be standardized, and I think procedure cards is a great example of that. Our work with institutes is an example of that. That when you have a care pathway and you say this is the way we're going to care for somebody with this issue, then we do that the same wherever we are. It's standard. Our facility should have the same way to serve folks. You have one portal to us. It's same everywhere we go. The supply chain operates the same way. My teams are running the supply chains wherever they are. We're running food wherever you are. So you should be standardized in your processes, in your data, in your practices. And that goes anywhere from job descriptions to the way you do the work. Procedure cards is a good example. Why have different ways to do preference cards? Why have different methods? And why have even different recipes for it? Why not have a standard procedure card? And so when we said we were going to tackle that as an enterprise, we said, let's go to the Clinical Care Institute and say, what is the best way to do X procedure? Well, here you go. And then we'll push that everywhere. Yes, you allow clinical deviations, but you have a standard and then you just measure to that. So we're in the midst of rolling that out. We have product standards. We have very few options for folks, and that drives better price, better compliance, better technique, less inventory. There's all the benefits that come from that. So when you think standardized, we're standardizing trays. So we'll have one knee tray. And so it's as much standard as we can in the work, in the lean, in the procedure as we can. When you think, okay, now that you're doing that, you can automate. And it's very hard to automate something that's not standardized. If you're trying to handle a lot receiving and you're not receiving the same way in every site, how do you automate that? Well, you got to create a bunch of flexibility in the systems, and that's really hard. But when you standardize, you can put in automation, and we're working on automation on all kinds of fronts. That might be material movement automation or agentic AI or anything or systems. So where do you put in ways to do those standard processes better and faster? On the centralized front, that could be workforce, like make sure they all have standard reporting structures to central towers or sourcing. We cover 95 plus percent of our spend, so it's centralized in sourcing. It could also be taking things out of hospitals that don't need to be there. And if your sterile processing is a great example, you don't need sterile processing in every single location. Those could be centralized, and you have turn centers at the hospitals and central automation centers, or PPI shipping and receiving. Instead of shipping implants to all the sites, ship them to a central location and bring it, and you save on logistics and storage and inventory. So we're working on processes that are bringing things out of hospitals that don't need to be. Think about laundry. How many hospitals have laundry anymore? Very few. You figured out that's better done out of the hospital setting. That was not the case 50 years ago. Everybody had washers and was running their own stuff. That wasn't the way to do it. You offsite it because then you could put in automation and standard and scale, right? We have a laundry facility and it's employee owned and it is incredibly automated and they wash everything the same way. So that's standardized, centralized, and automated already. So why not do that in other areas? So now when you start thinking about that, it generates efficiency, savings. You get the ability to scale when you do that because now you can do it the same way everywhere. If you look at other industries have already done that. Walmart doesn't have a separate distribution center for every site, Chick-fil-A doesn't have a separate, they have regional distribution centers that are standardized and automated that then process the network like it should. We learned from that and said we need to be better at doing these in central locations the same way.
Yeah. And as somebody who was in the laundry at Cleveland Clinic in 1990 when it was underneath the main facility, to see where you've come to now as a wealth generating, community based central laundry is really really impressive. And maybe, you know, I think you've described supply chain as a strategic enterprise uh, partner. How does that manifest itself? And what has changed in the last couple of years around achieving that? And that's a pretty high level designation within the organization. How do you achieve, kind of that status as a true partner at the strategic enterprise level?
Um, with a lot of teamwork and a lot of expertise and a lot of embedding. So we do a lot of communicating with all the stakeholders. Let's do business reviews to talk about their needs, our updates. We we do that with institutes or other stakeholders. We do embedded experts. So in my sourcing teams, we'll have somebody who is IT and they worked in IT, they know licensing, they know IT contracting, they know the tricks there. They're deeply embedded in IT. They go to staff meetings, they go to project meetings. They're like part of IT, but they report to us. And they don't think of them as let's kick this over to supply chain who I don't even know. It's like they're just part of the group, but we can be the expert in those areas. And that gives us the credibility in areas where you may not have. Pharmacy, we have pharmacists in our sourcing team. They're embedded deeply in the pharmacy team. And that's purposeful. And then where we don't have the expertise, then we find the expertise. And if there's out somewhere outside we have to go, then we go get it there.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you know how to look for those areas, right? Like for our audience, up and coming chief supply chain officers or leaders of supply chain, you've got support services as part of your title, and I see that as a trend that's happening for people at a certain level. How do you get folks to think about, hey, reaching and serving in different ways and looking for opportunities to add value?
Yeah, look at scope of spend. I think that's the best place to start. What are all those areas you're spending money? Think of our role as spend management. And it's not just source, it's not just clinical supplies, it's spend management. And if you think of a health system having levers on the revenue side, patient served, rev cycle, and then on the cost side, it's labor and spend. And if you think of it that way, then who should be the strategic partner for the C suite for that spend? Should be us. And if you think of it that way, we're a strategic asset to the health system. You're like, okay, I need to manage that spend the best possible way, right? I need to make sure it's benchmarked. I need to make sure it's organized and categorized. If you start from your span of spend and say, where do I have expertise? Where do I not? Where do I have trusted partners? Or where do I need to work on for a while? That will help you get to, okay, I need to do better in facility management. And we don't have expertise in that. Okay, well, maybe somebody in facilities wants to partner with us and we can be the bad guy in a contract negotiation. Well, I bet they would like that. Or streamline things with legal. I bet they would like that. Supply chain can play roles there and help get you into the conversations that then you're trusted to be a partner and you can manage that spend. If I showed you, Eric, the benchmarks in facilities and you said, wow, we're not great. How do I get better? Is a natural second question. You're like, oh, that's a great question. Let's figure out how to do that. Is it bids? Is it auctions? Is it partnerships? Do we need people with different expertise? Do I have to outsource? All that sort of stuff comes up.
And but some of it's governance. Like, how do you get the organization to give you, I don't know, even the right to be that partner of listening to end users, setting a specification for a product or a service? And you know, a lot of these areas are services, right? It's not med surge. It's typically not med device. It's the big categories of, you know, other stuff that doesn't come in a box. How are you going about getting to 94% management of all that spend?
I will tell you the biggest difference maker we've had, and I can't say every health system will do this, but we do a review with our CEO of indirect spend monthly. Anything above a certain threshold gets a review with CEO. And so that naturally means COO, CFO, chief IT are in the room because they want to understand what's being talked through. And suddenly, if your spend in your given area needs to go in front of the CEO, you're going to want my help. You're going to want to know this was very carefully managed. When was this last bid? What do the benchmarks say? What's the terms of the contract? How do we know we're getting the right price? What kind of utilization factors? What control do we have? And all of those questions are going to get asked. And so I can prep you on those calls to say, here's the form you need to fill out. Here's the questions you're going to need to answer. I'm at your side, my team are at your side to help work through this. And by the way, we should work at this maybe 6 months ahead of a contract deadline. You don't want to do this the week before. And that ends up making it a strategic decision. What the health systems could do, if you don't have that support, you could get that at a level above him. I'm sure the CFO would want to control their spend for those areas. Tell them you want to bring it to a monthly meeting, and you will bring the stakeholders to that meeting prepared to talk through things. They will want your help. And in that case, all of the gaps of the process come out. If you don't have benchmarks, if you don't have expertise, if you don't understand your contracts, if you haven't bid it in 10 years, if I showed up and said, we've always used the same supplier, we have 15 different ones, I've never run a bid on it, and we're horrible in our benchmarks. How do you think that's going to go? I probably would be presenting the next month, right? Or neither would my partner. It's going to go better than that. And you'll work to make it better by that level of accountability. And you can create that in however it works for your organization. It forces the span of spend control. Now, we've been fortunate. We've done that for a while. We've had that reputation in our organization, and it's a very team collaborative culture. But even implementing that executive review got uncomfortable for people, but that's good. It helps drive.
How so you heard it here, everybody. Just a monthly meeting with the CEO around supply chain spend.
That's all you need.
How did you get the first meeting? How did that come about? Like, what's the catalyst for that?
It was his idea, so that makes it easy.
Oh, that's great. It's pick the right CEO. And is there, you know, so you know, benchmarking. Some of this is in areas that you're not as comfortable or haven't had a history with. You could be, you know, I don't know, negotiating blind, or you don't know what the external benchmarks are outside of healthcare. Is there any riddle to how to go about thinking outside that box?
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to in general, and I I push that topic with everybody that it may be an area where you need to understand healthcare, could be very specific to healthcare, but it may not be. And window washing, it's a great example. If you're going to try to get benchmarks, are you going to benchmark window washing in other health systems? No. You're going to benchmark window washing in your geography. You need that. And what's the best practice in window washing? And, now it's fly a drone with a hose on it. The best way to contract those is probably regional geographic partners. Other folks have figured that out, right? The retail partners, Starbucks, have probably figured that out better than we have, right? So why are we looking at just healthcare for benchmarks and practices for window washing? It it comes to you have to find the best practice in that area, and it may be a different industry. It may be automotive, or it might be banking, or it might be whatever other area that is better at whatever we're talking about. Manage print. There are areas that are better than health systems that manage print. Fine. Find those and figure out what they're doing. because when you're starting to solve this, solving it just like every other health system is probably not the best answer.
Yeah. No, that's great and great insight, and, love the window washing, example. Maybe back to healthcare in some specific categories. So just interested in what you're doing, pharmacy and capital equipment are bigger and growing, for most health systems. Uh, Pharmacy, 23 and growing percent of the spend, capital equipment usually underrepresented. Are those things that Cleveland Clinic is doing to advance that supply chain in kind of these growing areas of spend?
Great question. And one area that let's dive on capital. Two tricks. The alignment around the enterprise for supplier and single buy, and then capital utilization. So we run standard capital processes by service line. So imaging, great example. Imaging runs a capital process closely partnered with us for all needs for imaging for a given year. And the imaging team works together with us to look at how many things need replacing or fixing, what new ones do we need, and we group that together so we have a single buy. It's not individual sites saying I want one, and placing them at different times. You get leverage. We are looking at doing even longer term group arrangements there that are multi-year. More to come on that. And on the utilization front, healthcare is really bad at capital efficiency. The folks like hotels are way better. They look at a given hotel, the amount of beds that are filled, and then the associated capital within that, the laundry, the food, dining, and then maximize that efficiency. And they get scale. So if there's regional Marriotts, they have offsite central work. We looked at our history of capital and said we're not efficient. As we continue to get new things, new patients, new growth, new geography, we add more capital. That's not capital efficiency. So, how would we get capital efficiency? Well, start looking at blockers for your capital. What's getting in the way of capital utilization? Do you know in Asia, they use robots 3 times more than we do in the US? Well, why? Because we schedule things in robot rooms, we allow physicians to do things before or after instead of putting more robot cases on it. There's patients that are late. Like you start looking at all the reasons, like we could be way more efficient of this. We're on a journey there. We're not done, but we're working capital service line by service line. We already organized those service lines now into how do we get better utilization measurements to look at blockers. Like that will make us overall more capital efficient. The pharmacy side is, I think the key to that is our partnership with pharmacy. And you need a really close tie to your chief pharmacy officer and that whole pharmacy team that the expertise in pharmacy sourcing. There's a lot of work there. And GPOs are great with it. Chief pharmacy officers are great with it. There's so much growth. Cell and gene therapy, it is incredible to look at the roadmap of what's coming. And there's specialty pharma, there's so much unique drugs. You have to know all the nuances. 503A, 503B, 340B, like you could rattle them all off. If you're not a pharmacist, that's like, what? What's the nuance of that stuff? If you're a pharmacist, you know that cold, tie that to somebody who knows how to negotiate a price, and that'll get you savings in pharmacy.
Yeah. Cell and gene therapy, I'm fascinated to watch that supply chain evolve. Uh, I just got to think there's going to be hubs or somebody's going to solve it in some unique ways, that'll be super, super creative.
It's so hard, right, Eric? Like, there's so much back and forth of how to do that, that like our logistics brain say we should not live in a world where it's that hard. We can fix this.
Yeah. Well, it's got so many components. It's got cold chain, it's got tracking, it's individual, and it's high stakes stuff. But a great place for supply chain to layer in there, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for somebody to innovate. And speaking of innovation, let's talk about that at a big capital level. You're a multi-state, multi-country health system. I know the CSC strategy is changing there. Services and distribution and automation is tied into that. Talk about what that is looking like for you, what that vision is, and how you got support uh, for such a grand vision.
So, yeah, good question. In thinking about how to centralize and standardize, you think about all those things that are in the hospitals that don't need to be. And product, one of them, SPD, one of them, pharmacy, IT services, clinical engineering, right? You go down the list of things that are decentralized. Say, does that need to be decentralized or should it be done at scale? It only works if you have geographic concentration, right? We have that. I'm fortunate that we have Florida, Cleveland, large geographies. The Then it becomes okay, what goes in there and how you'd want to do it. And fortunately, because we're a team oriented culture, we could say, think outside your reporting lines. What functionally should go on a truck? What would be off-sited that should go on a single shipment to one of the hospitals? Well, you start rattling those off, you hit the 5 that I just said are gonna be off-sited. Like, that makes sense to be off-sited. Okay, great. And you can have a space in the central facility. Great. Then you say, you wanna do it manual or you wanna be automated? Well, when you start doing it scale, and I'm fortunate that we have scale in Cleveland, we can automate some of these. And especially with the lowering costs of today's automation, you can put in things like storage and retrieval systems, ASRSs, or AGVs, or little robots for material movement, things that really move product around. And so then we said, okay, we're going to be automated. I went to Denmark and I saw the automated SPD that they're running and super forward thinking. It took them a long time to do, but it's highly automated. And material is moving on AGVs and conveyors and stored in ASRSs and control systems, robotic arms. It's on 3 floors. We're moving case carts through multi floors. It's super impressive. And so that gave me a vision of what SPD could be like. I went to Walmart, saw their next gen distribution facilities. They customize the box to be the size of the product, and they can even print on your custom box. The level of automation that can happen at the scale that a place like Walmart is doing is absolutely incredible. And so when you see that, how it all works, like, of course we can automate our simple stuff. I think one of the keys that I've seen to this whole change journey that we push is you got to believe all of this is possible. And in fact, we did a program where we took executives to Walmart and to Silicon Valley and showed them that, like, digital twins are possible and capital utilization efficiency like hotels are possible and Walmart efficiency in automation and warehouse is possible. These have already been there. We're not pushing some envelope that get doesn't exist. Yeah, you just go put it in your operation. Oh, okay. Well, that's not scary. So once you realize that, you're like, why wouldn't you automate? Now, there are parts we're not automating totally on purpose. And those parts you need intervention, you need people, and all warehouses and operations like this run that way. So we're carefully going through the operations and saying this step should be automated. Does it make sense for somebody to push a cart half a mile? No, have an AGV do that. And no person wants to do that. Does it make sense to do each pick by hand? Probably. If I'm picking a comb out of a bin, yes. So go through each step and decide which one we need automation. We do that. And I'm trying to learn from all these other industries. When you present the fact that we can get this all centralized, and by centralizing, you get scale and you get resiliency. And that's the biggest question I'd say I got from executive and board. Are you more resilient or less? you are more. Because if you think about the risk, put SBD, for example, you have water treatment at every site. You have pipes and drainage, and you have whatever equipment happen to be in that place and whatever capital improvement cycle. And you have teams of folks who may be small teams working on multiple shifts. Would you rather run 15 of those? Or would you rather run one and those are consolidated into one where you have a well controlled water system with backup and power with backup with a sophisticated drainage system built for SPD? Like, you'd rather have that. You can always have your sites be your backup when the roads are closed, but that's not going to be for months. It's short term. You build resiliency into your offsite, and then you become more resilient in your operation. And when you think about it that way, you're like, of course you should be offsite. How fast can you get this thing up and running? And then it became you're right. Now, are you doing the right automation or are you over automating or under? The key question on that one, and what I learned is leave space for the future. Unloading a truck is a great point. There isn't great technology at going into a truck, getting things, bringing it out onto a receiving dock and setting it up. Whether that's floor loaded, pallet, whatever. There's not great technology to have that flexibility. There probably will be in the next 5 years. Right now, there's not. So, how do these big operations who do that? They don't have automation there. They have people with a conveyor that goes into the truck, and they left space for automation. They put power drops and IT drops and left room to automate. Let that go in the future. And in the future, they know we're going to watch that space. And when we see something, we'll try it on one of our docks. So we're going to do that where there's not anything there today, but in the future we could. Fine, we'll do that.
Skating to where the puck is. I love it, and that's been your hallmark. So, two more questions for you, Steve, and one is about ARM. You're the chair of the ARM advisory board, and I think you made a statement to say, how does ARM stay relevant and adapt to the times? And you felt like maybe some of your leadership's been around what that looks like. How's that manifesting itself, and what is why the passion for ARM and what they're doing these days?
ARM is about education and advocacy and leadership. And if I think about what I want to bring the industry, yes, like right there, right? So we have been working a lot this year on being relevant for the broad swath of healthcare supply chain. And folks interested in ARM may think of the operational side of ARM, but we've expanded it to be technology, supply chain relevant technology, sourcing, operations, clinical interface, all the pieces of healthcare supply chain. We call them tracks. And so, for example, at this year's meeting, there's a panel about relevant technology in healthcare supply chain. Myself, Kaiser, Mayo, Logic Source, others are there talking about what new technologies are we doing? What have we learned? How do you evaluate the good and the bad? That's not your old ARM. That's today's ARM. We're doing programs like case competitions at schools and having the schools have standard case competitions that you can then bring in the next generation of supply chain folks and have them talk through the problems and help health systems partner on those problems. And then we're going to roll that up into a national competition. Imagine the excitement if we had all these schools working at healthcare related supply chain problems with like the next generation of experts feeding that in, with health systems saying that works great. There's a challenge, suppliers feeding in. That sounds like an absolutely amazing program where we would all benefit. And so we started talking about that. Like, that's something I want to help be a part of and help make that come into the industry, use the voice I have to advocate folks to be part of that, to hear it, be part of it, support it, learn from it, contribute to ARM because we're all trying to do this together. ARM's a great convener of all that.
No, amazing. And you've done amazing work, and that sounds super exciting, right? There's all these great supply chain degreed folks coming out, right? That didn't exist 40 years ago when it wasn't even a program, and we should be taking advantage of it. So kudos to you for that work. And so maybe our last question: you are the giving the commencement address for new and upcoming supply chain leaders. What would you tell them to do over the next 3 to 5 years to add the most value to the industry and to their own organizations?
Well, my answer should be come find out so you could come see my speech. And I would tell you, if I tell you now, everybody's going to watch this and not come see my speech. But in general, I will tell you, think about other industry partners. What can you learn wherever the problem existed? What can you do in the longer run more than just today? Think a few steps ahead and then think about how to step past today. There are so many times in this world, Eric, I have heard people say we can't solve that right now. And we say, okay, what would it look like when it's fixed a few years from now? And they start talking about the answer. And you're like, okay, now that you have that answer, what would it take to get there? And they outline the path. And you say, do you realize you just go do that? Huh. All I thought about was the obstacles. I didn't think about the long term answer and the path to get there. Right. Take your eye off that problem in front of you and work towards a long term roadmap that will help you overcome the problem and build on your teams. Teams are the best engine we have. Work with the people, their education, their support, their motivation. For us, healthcare is a service industry. It's about the patient. Think about that. Think about the relevance you have for it. Connect your workforce to the work they do with the patients. Tell stories about the way we've done hero work there. Think about the day to day that we serve all the time in the enterprise. So much good we can do if you focus on that. Everybody will be motivated to go through all of the hard work it takes to get there.
Well, with that, Steve, that's great. That's a great charge to all the supply chain leaders. I hope people get to hear your speech. I'm sure that will be a great one. And we've spent a good amount of time here. I call this the extended dance mix, smarter sourcing healthcare, because you had so many great things to share, and I had questions that we couldn't even get to. But I really appreciate you being on here and all that you're doing for the industry. You've been a amazing leader, both at Cleveland Clinic and for the industry. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Eric.
It's great to have you. And with that, this has been Smarter Sourcing Healthcare. I'm Eric O'Daffer, and have a great day, everybody. Keep doing what you're doing and supporting the world through the healthcare supply chain. Take care.